and they're one of the most amazing organizations out. So we appreciate the American Vegan Society so much, and especially Jay Dinshaw, who is one of the pioneers in teaching ahimsa, especially to me. I learned so much from Jay over the years. So thank you, American Vegan Society and Jay Dinshaw. So who is living with harmony? Well, I'm John Pierre, and this is Andrea Rose. And one of the interesting things is that we actually met at an American Vegan event, and we started this organization about 13 years ago. So was about right?
We started working on planning for this about that time.
Yeah, so we were, I've been vegan for close to 40 years. And how long have you been vegan?
32 years.
32 years. So we got about 70 years of veganism here. And we wanted to just combine our efforts basically to make the world a better place, because we saw a lot of the vegan conferences and vegetarian conferences. There was a lot of things they weren't covering, and we really wanted those things to be covered. So we created Living with Harmony. And our mission is pretty simple. You can see it right there. It's to heal, inspire, and transform the lives of people, which is important, animals, and the planet through planet-based living. And this is important because this is a term that we coined. So planet-based living was coined by us, and the secret to it is it's a lifestyle. So it's not a diet. It's a lifestyle that's made up of conscientious choices. And here's the big thing, actions. We just don't think about things, we take action on them. And these are things that are designed to put the planet first for the wellness of ourselves and other human beings and sentient beings and the planet. And it's not, our organization is really about we. It's not a self-centered, so it's not the ego, it's not me, 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 me. Our decisions are based on what's best for everyone and everything. We don't look at it, what's best for me. Would you say that's correct?
Yeah. Not the we, not the me.
Yeah. So here's a key component of planet-based living. This is a very important quote. The greatest threat to our planet is the belief that someone else will save it. And nothing could be further from the truth, because that's the problem, is everyone thinks they see us, Andrea and I, and other organizations doing incredible work and working around the clock. And they think, oh, that's all we need to do is just let you guys do your work. No, not at all. It's all the individuals on the planet that need to take action. It's not about 100 or 200 people doing a lot of amazing work. It's about each individual doing something to save the planet. As you can see from on the left-hand side, man stands at the top with ego dominating all species. And that's not how it's supposed to be. If you look at the bottom, that's the eco-friendly version where we all get along. And if you look in the upper right-hand corner, if you look at our logo, Living with Harmony, you see all the different footprints, and men and women included, and on different animals and plants. We're all supposed to get along living with harmony, but we're all supposed to do the work. It's not just one person does the work. So why do we need planet-based living? Well, gosh, I mean, take a look at this photo. If this is any indication of why, I mean, the rate at which we're annihilating the planet and the animals' homes and all these different species is astronomical. As a matter of fact, yesterday in the news, what came out in the news yesterday?
Well, Antarctica, which is the coldest place on the planet, is actually 70 degrees Fahrenheit above normal.
70, that's 70.
Yes. And so this is just astonishing. It's astonishing scientists, and it's just a very big warning call of what's to come.
So when we say why planet-based living, we've been teaching this forever, and people in the 70s were teaching it. That's where I start learning about it, in the late 70s. But it's, I mean, my gosh, the question, why planet-based living? It's like we need it more now than ever.
So here we have, right now we're entering the 6th mass extinction. Many scientists believe we're entering the 6th mass extinction. This is a human-caused event. The last mass extinction was 66 million years ago with the loss of the dinosaurs. So we are able to create our own extinction. And right now we're losing species at rates that's much higher, 1,000 and 10,000 times higher than the natural extinction rate. So we need to be acting on this now, every day.
When we take a look at what's happening with the planet and the garbage and the waste that we are creating and carelessly creating and not even giving any thought to it, it's astronomical. I mean, this is basically a good example of what would you say this is?
This is like a typical landfill. We see everything in here from single-use items, lots of bottles, to everyday use, more durable items, trash cans, animal carriers, plastic chairs, all things that we take for granted and just use all the time until they crack or break. And then they go in the dumpster, and which goes to the landfill.
Because people throw them away and they think there's some mystical, magical place called away. So one of the things that I'm concerned about, I've been teaching nutrition for over 35 years, been vegan for almost 40. And I'm very concerned about the rates at which I see children coming in with more and more problems, emotional problems, attention deficit, hyperactivity, and obesity. And I want you to think about what we're doing today to these crops. When we're producing all these pesticides, I want you to start thinking about, where do these dangerous caustic chemicals go? I mean, of course they go on the food, and then we ingest the food. And when you think of words like suicide, homicide, genocide, you might as well add pesticide in there, and they all have one thing in common, and that would be death. So when we start spraying these crops with these caustic chemicals so we can get better yields, there's a repercussion to this. Why is this person wearing basically a hazmat suit? Because these are caustic, dangerous chemicals. Now, not only are they dangerous to you, and especially children who don't have their livers and their endocrine glands and everything fully developed, but they're dangerous to the soil. And the soil, with all these billions and trillions of different microorganisms, that's basically like our microbiome, the soil. That's what keeps the earth healthy. And we're destroying that microbiome. Then we're destroying the insects, and we're destroying the worms, and they get contaminated with pesticides, and then a bird comes and eats that worm, and then the bird gets contaminated, and then the bird dies, and then the fox eats it. So it's this vicious cycle. These are very dangerous chemicals, and we're using them at an alarming rate today. And what's even scarier is we're buying produce from other countries that we don't allow their pesticides here, but we'll be more than happy to buy their pesticide-grown products and then eat them here in the United States. Very scary. When you start spraying these crops with pesticides, you do not yield higher nutrients, because plants get stronger and produce more antioxidants when they're exposed to stresses. So when there's fungus and bacteria and heat and drought and things like that, the plant responds by getting stronger and producing more antioxidants. And you've heard of these different antioxidants, whether it's carotenoids or something like resveratrol, which is one of the most important antioxidant nutrients known. So when you're spraying these crops with pesticides, you're hurting your own health and, of course, the planet.
I know a lot of people are saying, well, I only eat organic, and so this doesn't really apply to me. But unfortunately, there's a lot of area, this is an area a lot of people don't think about, other lawns. Lawns use an incredible amount of pesticides and herbicides to maintain something that does not create habitat for animals or any health for animals. We use an incredible amount of pesticides and herbicides that end up running off. They run off when we water the lawns, they run off and get into our water supply through the drain systems. And that creates problems with the waterways. So we create these horrible toxic algae blooms, and those do massive fish kills, responsible for massive fish kills. And we use an incredible amount of water. So is it estimated that homeowners use 30% of their water use goes to maintain their lawns. So instead of having lawns that support life, we actually have these areas that are devoid of life. And then we have to think, what about all the trash bags? When we mow our lawns, we put them all in the trash bag, and that creates even more waste and methane. And makes methane too, because this goes into the landfill. It's not disposed of properly. And then that creates a horrible greenhouse gas and is trapped in the landfills. So as I mentioned, we use an incredible amount of pesticides, 80 million pounds of pesticides.
Just for our lawns.
Just for lawns. Mm-hmm. And that becomes a major source of water pollution.
And we're using about 1 billion pounds, or no, it's 1 million pounds, I think, on our crops. So when you start looking at all this stuff, I mean, the chemicals that go on our food, and then in the soil, and then in the water, and then at home, it's pretty omnipresent, these chemicals.
So this matters because I mentioned the fish kills, but the manatee in Florida, they are suffering because the population boom in Florida, everyone has to have their lawns, and then they have the runoff from their lawns. And this runoff from the big industry, they have the agricultural industry in Florida, the sugar industry, and a few other major industries, that's creating that's creating the seagrass. That's creating a situation where the seagrass is dying off from fertilizer runoff, actually runoff from cruises, which is a big industry in Florida, which we'll talk about later. But all this runoff, the human processing plants, that is killing the seagrass, and manatee need that to live. We lost 1,100 manatee in 2020, in 2021. In 2022, we started out the year with losing over 400 manatee, and they're less than 10,000 to begin with in the wild right now.
And many of them also die from propeller accidents.
Yeah,
Getting hit by ships.
The boats, yeah, exactly, too. So now we move on to shipping. We started to talk a little bit about shipping and boats and boat accidents, but we're so reliant on imported goods. So I don't know if a lot of people realize that a lot of these goods, to keep them cheap, we have these major companies. A lot of these products are produced in foreign countries that are thousands of miles away. They rely on these big, huge freight liners. And these freight liners release an awful amount of carbon. That's one of the things, that the carbon pollution that they produce just to go across the ocean thousands of miles. They also use a very toxic oil. So they use this heavy oil on these ships. And this heavy oil, each cruise liner can use 66 gallons a day.
66,000.
66,000 gallons a day. And this heavy oil, they clean the engines, and they make this wastewater, and that's called bilge water, and they actually dump that into the ocean. So they dump this water. It's actually illegal dumping of this water, and this has been noted, this has been monitored. There have been 3,000 dumpings like this in European waters alone, and they do it in deep seas. I think that no one sees them, which they do. They go largely unnoticed, but this oil slick will then can go to the seashores, and that's where it wreaks havoc on the wildlife, fish kills, and all the other animals in the ocean. So they're polluting the waters. The fuel is producing an awful amount of carbon. These ships produce like 3% of carbon emissions for the total carbon emissions for the planet, because we're so dependent on these freight liners. So we just have to reiterate, we really focus, and we tell people to try to buy less, buy used, and buy local. That means if you can find products in your own area that were grown in your own country or produced in your own country, it might cost a little bit more, or it might be a little bit harder to find them, but then you're being less dependent, and try to reduce our needs as much as possible on these huge monster ships that wreak havoc on the planet.
It would be best if the biggest solution that we have is we could just learn to buy more. That would be the most important thing, is just buy less. I mean, buy less stuff, and don't buy as much as we used to, because that's the biggest problem. Like, we shop at thrift stores, so we don't purchase things directly. I mean, people give us shirts or things like that, or we get our clothing at thrift stores or appliances and things like that, because we don't want to contribute to this. And if you look at the next slide, you'll see one of the reasons why.
So in addition to all the pollution that these ships create, they're responsible for 90% of goods transported around the world. So they are creating an incredible amount of emissions and pollution. But this explosion, they carry toxic chemicals as well. And so this explosion happened last year in Sri Lanka, and this boat was carrying billions of pellets of plastic. So these plastic pellets were being transported to make disposable, cheap plastic goods. So this would be going into our disposable forks and spoons and carry-out containers, and you name it. So these pellets ended up in the ocean, in the environment. So one can only imagine what fish and animals are eating these pellets when they go into the environment, and the burning of plastics. When you burn plastics, they release dioxin in the environment. That's a very harmful chemical, and you can see all the smoke here. So we are polluting everything with this lifestyle. It's not a sustainable lifestyle to keep things healthy on this planet.
And for people who eat fish, that dioxin then comes back down into the water and gets into the fish, and then people eat the fish. And especially little kids, again, as I said, who aren't fully developed, they're taking in mass amounts of mercury and dioxin and all these poisons, and it's affecting their health and well-being.
Here we have another cargo ship that went down more recently, probably a week or two.
Yeah.
This was in the Persian Gulf, and 4,000 luxury cars went down with this ship. So those are all the resources lost forever, just this shipping everything. Okay, so after the ship, we just need to realize the United States is only 5% of the world's population, but we use 24% of the resources. So we have a problem there with the resources. After all these items with our shopping therapy and all the shopping that we do, then these items go to the ports, and then from the ports they go on these trucks. Well, these trucks are also responsible for an incredible amount of emissions. They contribute their own. So the whole transportation sector contributes about 8% of emissions for the planet. So that's not including our own use, but our own cars and everything like that is 8%. But these trucks are on the roads and they contribute immensely to traffic and problems with transporting all these items. Again, we try to say, let's try to reduce these trucks on the roads by doing the buy less, buy use, and buy local.
Yeah, there's like what, 4 million miles of roads too.
Yeah. So there's 4.1 million miles of roads, and these trucks mostly travel at night. And nighttime is when we have a lot of roadkill. So the roadkill is phenomenal. In the US alone, we lose over 1 million animals every year to road accidents. So we just want to bring up that having all these extra cars on the roads, it's just so hazardous for the animals. And it's something that we just want to just bring out to people, so people are aware of that when they choose to see something on the shelf, just to think of these images.
And this is a good example because it doesn't end there, because once it goes onto those trucks, these smaller trucks then have to pick up that stuff.
Yeah. So then they leave the trucks bring them to the stores, and then or the warehouses. And then these trucks are going to bring them to you, FedEx, US Mail. And then when you're done using the items, they go on more trucks and they go to the landfill, or they go on recycling trucks and say, oh, okay, I recycle. Well, those still go on trucks, and they still go sometimes to the same place. As we know, the recycling system is broken, but that's going yet on more trucks.
So again, the solution is being happy with what we have and not demanding more and more, because that will reduce the basically the assault on the planet.
On a collective effort.
Sure. This is something that's very interesting, this planned obsolescence, and you really start educating a lot of people about this. You want to talk briefly about it?
Well, the planned obsolescence is just, it's not your imagination that items are breaking. You say, gosh, my grandmother had a refrigerator for 50 years and it lasted forever, the Frigidaire or whatever it was, and now my refrigerators last 5 years. So it ends up being more expensive to repair something than say, I'll just get a new one. So that's the companies are doing this on purpose to keep us buying. And then when we're finished with these items, they go in the landfill, or a lot of people don't recycle them properly, because in some places, if it is available to recycle them, you have to pay to recycle them. So they're like, oh, I'll just throw that in the landfill. So we're ending up with a lot of appliances and items that are used for a very short period of time. It's really hard to keep up with that. Now, I was fortunate enough. My water heater recently was malfunctioning, and I had a plumber come out, and right without even looking at it, he's like, well, due to the age of your water heater, you need to replace it. And I said, well, I don't think it's failing. I think it's something with the heat, because it lasts for like 10 minutes and then it stops. So I talked to another plumber through a friend that was coming from a different situation, and he told me that he would replace the heating unit, which he did. So it was like $236, and my water heater is working fine. And I put a water sensor on the ground just to make sure it doesn't fail, because it is getting on the older side. But to me, that's a better solution than buying. I got a quote for like $8,000 to get a new water heater, and plus the old water heater, what is going to happen with that? So I was really happy that at least I tried to salvage what I had. It really made me feel really good.
And that's the same thing with phones. So living with Harmony, we don't buy new phones. Well, usually people donate phones to us and we use them, or if we have to, we buy a refurbished phone, just so we prevent, those are precious minerals.
So we just want to remind people, when you love what you have everything you need. So I just love that picture. It just makes me feel really good inside.
Yeah, just be happy with what you had. You don't need 15, 20 pairs of shoes and 12 different jackets. It's like, we just need to learn to be happy with what we have and not try to keep up with the Joneses and be watching Instagram all the time and all these YouTubers that are, throwing dollars down the drain. It's unfortunately, it's all the media that's educating us to think we need to keep buying and buying and buying. And people think this type of retail therapy is going to fill the void in them, and it won't. So now this is my favorite slide. So vegans are not exempt, and that includes us. even though we've been vegan maybe collectively for 70 years, we're not exempt from this. And we have to work just as hard as you do, and sometimes even harder, because, we are doing our best to lead by example. And so vegans aren't exempt. And one of the biggest challenges that we see is at vegan conferences. We want to talk about this?
Sure. Something that Living with Harmony does is we go to events and conferences, and we try to take over or volunteer for I call it waste diversion, because I'm trying to prevent items from unnecessarily going to the landfill. So that is my job. Quite often I have to go through the trash, because although we have different bins for things, they all end up in the same place. So even though cans will end up in the trash and food will end up in the recycling, etc., if this goes on, the whole lot gets contaminated and nothing gets salvaged.
Like that. That's something that will be all waste.
Yeah. So this is at a conference. It was an actual conference. I just took a picture of that, where we have everything in there: food waste, recyclables, compost. And just walking around, it just seems everyone, even though if these bins are available in Boulder, Colorado, we have these bins everywhere downtown to separate trash, yet we still see things like this because people are not sorting things properly.
And that's actually a vegan restaurant.
So here I did a vegan restaurant here in town. And we're fortunate enough that we have commercial compost available, which means that the city picks it up. So the restaurant here, people have a can in there, and this Dixie cup, which is actually not recyclable, and the food and the compost, this is all in the trash can. It's not in the proper bins. And so this is just being cognizant and just being mindful of trying your hardest to prevent something. Just don't think the landfill is the place where everything is going. It's like, when you think about the landfill, where is it? Where is a way? It's just leaving this place, going someplace else. And that is someone else's home, leaving your home. So this is just something to think about.
Now, this is a typical vegan conference, and almost every conference, where we get water, but then we get a plastic cup with it. And if you think to yourself, lots of people, and I've seen this forever, they'll use multiple cups throughout the day. They won't just take one and write their name on it. They'll use one every time they go for water. So if it's a 3-day conference, imagine how many plastic cups they're going through. So you need to be prepared to bring your own water bottle, or, to be honest, go without. Don't make the animals or the planet suffer because of poor choices. And the next slide shows you exactly why. That's the question to ask yourself. Is that your cup? And you may be saying no. And the question I'd ask you is, how do you know? Because you threw a dozen cups away at the vegan conference. Where did they go? They're not getting recycled, that's for sure. And then the next slide. This is one of the challenges we're seeing today, is this convenience everywhere we go. Sure, these are healthier foods. It's better than a candy bar, but the packaging is not healthy for you, because look at any time you're taking something acidic and you start melting away that plastic, you're ingesting that plastic. And then when you're done with that plastic container, where does it go? Because it's not going into some recycling bin. It's going back into the garbage, and then it eventually ends up into those waterways. And then we get the next slide. And then we see the smoothies and juices and the plastic straws, and hummus is kind of synonymous with being vegan. And that's wonderful. It's a healthy food for you. It's great, but the plastic container is not great.
So in fact, when these plastics go in the environment, which a lot of them end up in the environment, they break down, they photobiodegrade, they just break down into smaller and smaller pieces. And this is equivalent, we are eating the equivalent of the amount of weight of a credit card every week, or 2,000 tiny pieces. I just saw in the news today that microplastics have been detected in human blood for the first time. So we're drinking microplastics when they end up in the water. We're eating microplastics when they end up in our food. It's unavoidable. And so with all the billions of pieces of trash that end up in the environment every year, it's no wonder why this is happening. These plastics break down the nanoparticles, tiny, tiny particles, and it's impossible to avoid them.
And we're actually breathing them too.
They go through the air as well.
And these are endocrine disruptors, so they mess up your internal organs, especially your immune system. And they're one of the things that they're starting to link to obesity too.
So I know a lot of people think, oh, I recycle, I rinse out my containers, and that's great. I'm glad that people are taking the time to do that. But that really helps wildlife for one thing, because they get their heads stuck when they try to lick out peanut butter jars and so forth. So kudos, that's great. But in reality, less than 10% of plastics are actually recycled. So that's just something astonishing. So every time you think, oh, I'll just grab this water bottle once, or I'll just grab this hummus container once because I'm going to recycle it, not a big deal. The reality is less than 10% of plastics are actually recycled. That in fact, they end up in landfills, they end up in foreign countries, they end up incinerated, which, as I mentioned before, releases dioxin into the environment. So this is something that we just cannot use and expect it to be recycled. It should be something that we think is not going to be recycled, and try to think whenever you see something that no, it's a single-use item, kind of think of it more of a single-use item.
You know, one of the high schools that I was volunteering at, I was working with coaches and I was working with other teachers there. And this, of course, the students, everyone got to know me pretty well, especially the janitors, because I was most concerned about them being exposed to toxic chemicals all day. So one of the things I said to the janitors was, said, hey, you know, this is amazing. You have all this recycling bins here. I love it. And they said, can we let you in on a little secret? And I said, sure. And they said, we take all that recycling, we throw it in the garbage. So the schools, all the kids who thought they were recycling their cans and bottles, they weren't, because the janitors were heaving it all in the garbage. So it wasn't getting recycled anyhow. And since China and different parts of Asia are no longer buying our plastic and our recyclables, in the United States, we don't know what to do with it anymore. So they're just dumping it or burning it.
The system is broken.
Mm-hmm.
So we ask this again, when you throw something away, where is away? I have this taped to my waste receptacle in my kitchen, just to try to remind myself. Now these birds are here, they're foraging on this landfill, they're eating the plastic trash. They end up getting foreign bodies, they get blockages. If they don't get a blockage and they keep surviving long enough, they're going to get malnutrition because they think they're full and they don't eat as they should or drink as they should. So it eventually leads to death, which could be a horrible death because it's very painful to suffer from a blockage. And this not only happens, it not only happens on the sea, this happens in the Middle East. Camels have been found with up to 2,000 plastic bags in their stomachs. This happens quite commonly in India, where cows wander the streets foraging, looking for food. They don't have grazing land there, so they have to go forage for their food. And so this happens around the world, where animals are eating our trash and our waste and suffering as a result.
And also, I taught in India, so I saw all these cows. I was watching them very closely. They're not feeding them. They're just going out eating garbage and plastic. And like you said, the camels, I think, have about 50, they've been had to 52 pounds of plastic. Yeah, kilograms in them, yes.
Here's just a quick photo. We won't stay on here too long, but this is an albatross, a common seabird that is one of the victims that has commonly found plastic trash. This is just lids and bottle caps too. It's not even the bottles. It's the remnants of other things.
And you know what a big one too is plastic straws. So we see that actually in turtles. Turtles have them stuck in their nose. And so it's so simple today to got compostable straws, glass straws, silicone straws. We don't need to have plastic straws. So this is a good example of your plastic bags. When they go into the waterways, which they, of course, they end up there, the sea turtles don't know the difference between them and jellyfish because they look alike. And if you look at the next slide, the question to ask yourself is this: is that your plastic bag? So, you know, why do you have to use a plastic bag? I mean, just use your own canvas bag. You don't need to have plastic bags. It's simple to take a backpack, a duffel bag. I actually take I use a box a lot of the time and just put my food in a big box, and I just keep reusing the box over and over again.
And if you forget, you can always wheel the cart out to your car or your bike or the hand basket and then bring it back. So that's the penalty. You get a little bit of exercise to bring that bag, the cart out to and bring it back. Mm-hmm. Maybe remember next time.
And this is a plastic water bottle that actually looks like a fish in the water. And especially these plastic soda bottles that have red and green on them, they're colored ones. Those definitely look like fish. And unfortunately, the sea life is ingesting them, and many of them are dying from that. I've gone to the turtle, they're actually like hospitals. Rehab centers. Yeah, rehab and hospitals in Florida. And I've seen what most of those animals are in there for, and it's ingesting a lot of these plastics.
And boat strikes.
Oh, that's true.
Okay, here's just another example of another victim here. We have hermit crabs that are dying by the millions. And again, they're using the parts of plastic bottles that are typically not recycled. Well, people think they're just end up somewhere else, but the plastic lids and the caps and that sort of thing. So, and it's been in the news lately that there's been, by 2050, there could be more plastic in the ocean than fish by weight. So this is just something that's not too far off. So 2050, so we need to be thinking about this, what we're contributing to this crisis.
Okay, so the world dumps a massive 2 billion tons of waste every year. And again, when they dump it, the question is, where does it go? It's not some black hole that just makes it disappear. It's back into the environment. So whatever is being produced is going back into the environment and wasting away and causing methane and plastic. All right, so here we get to the scary part, gang. So this version is not scary in terms of there's not like a ton of bad stuff, but there's some disturbing things to think about. And I just want to preface this by saying that we are here just to share information. All we do is provide information. We don't make judgments on what people do. All we want to do is supply facts and figures and talk about what the repercussions are. And then you can decide what you want to do with that information. We're constantly trying to improve. Andrea's always working on herself. She's correcting me all the time. I get corrected all the time about things. So it's always a work in progress. So let's go to the first slide here. This is the scary one. This is almonds. So we all generally love almond products because we drink almond milk, we have almond yogurt, we love the almond cheese, and of course, almond butter is a staple in the vegan community. And though these are products that are fairly tasty and they've created a lot of interesting products with them, there is a karmic trail and some repercussions to using them.
For one thing, almonds are grown, 80% of the world's almonds are grown in California, and they're grown in the desert area of California where there's no water. So we have to ask ourselves, is this a sustainable product? When we start increasing the global demand, because they put almonds in everything, it takes about 15 gallons of water to produce 16 almonds, and it's just contributing, it's not a sustainable product at all. In addition to the water use, okay, so that's not a big deal. What about the bees are used solely to pollinate these almonds? And 1.6 million beehives are trucked to California from all over the United States every year in the springtime. So they put all these hives on these trucks, livestock-like vehicles, and transport these bees. Now, this is very stressful for the bees. You know, if you've heard about bees suffering from viruses and bacteria and parasites, the bees have weakened immune systems because of how they treat the bees. Now, they're considered livestock by the USDA, and they're considered a very important livestock to serve this purpose. And so this is just something else to add to the water use, and the bees behind this is something that's also something that's to think about whenever you think about almonds.
Well, I think you need to look at the most important number here, 1.1 trillion gallons of water every year to produce, these almonds. That's unimaginable in an area that's a desert and is suffering from massive forest fires and dryness and drought. The only crop that uses more water than that would be the alfalfa, and alfalfa is for the dairy industry or the meat industry. This is a massive drain. So when the vegan community complains to people who eat meat that, hey, you're eating meat and it's using up all the water, that's true. But the vegan community also needs to step up to the plate and raise their standards and say, hey, there's some things that we're doing that maybe we could cut back on. The way I like to look at it is, let's leave the almond products for people who are new to veganism. Let them try the new cheeses and the almond milks and the almond butters. And for people who have been vegan for a while, let's use some alternative ones. We could use oat milk or soy milk, and there's different types of cheeses, that we could try.
So as I mentioned, the bees are very stressed from the way that they're handled and treated. And this is a staggering number. More bees die every year than all other fish and animals raised for slaughter combined. Now, it's hard to know how many fish are used, but we do know that it's in the billions and trillions, and we don't even know. But this is a staggering loss.
So does anybody know what this is? I would venture that not many people know what this is. And when you do find out what it is, I think you'll be shocked. This is cryopreserved tubes of actual honey bee semen stored at the DSDA's Genetic Preservation Center in Fort Collins, Colorado, not very far from here. And do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because this is really scary.
Okay, so bees, as I mentioned, are livestock. So the first bees started to be artificially inseminated in the 1790s. They started experimenting with that, and it really became popular in the 1970s and 80s, where they're trying to selectively breed bees to produce more honey and to be more gentle or be more docile. So to do that, they artificially inseminate the bees. And so that puts them right up there with dairy cows and pigs and other animals that are also turkeys. So they're up there with everyone else as an animal that is being exploited for what they can do for humans.
And this is a pretty graphic photo.
We'll stay on this pretty briefly, but no species are exempt. And this is a male drone honeybee, and they're actually squeezed to death to get the semen out, and then they're done with them. It takes 10 to 15 male drones to inseminate one queen.
And remember, it takes a lifetime for bees to produce 1 tablespoon of honey.
And in addition, the queens, they are sedated with gas, the CO2 gas, and to be inseminated, they don't accept it willingly. And so they also lose some queens in the process as well. So it's a very brutal thing that we do to bees.
We're going to move quickly because we only have about 15 minutes left. So let's cover palm oil a little bit. This is one that we get a lot of, I guess, kind of criticism for, because so many vegans love their palm oil. And if you take a look at that where it says palm oil, you'll see it's burning. That's fire. And that's one of the things that we need to take a look at, is in order to obtain this mystical, magical, saturated fat, this palm oil, which is not healthy. No one would think it's going to be healthy. It requires a lot of destruction, because they're not using necessarily bulldozers to take down these rainforests, but they're burning them. And there's so many people that live in that area that do get smoke from this. They're going to hospitals, and children who have asthma. It's really causing a disturbance there, not to mention worldwide. And so do you want to just talk briefly about the palm industry, just quickly, because we have a lot to cover still.
So let's go to the next slide, please. So when the orangutans and the animals are displaced, when the areas are deforested through fire, slash and burn, and through trucks and deforestation, the animals are actually become nuisance animals when they go looking for food in the towns and villages. A lot of them are killed, captured, enslaved. This is just an example of an orangutan being darted.
Some are not only, and when you said enslaved, I think most people wouldn't even want to hear what's done to them, but
we won't mention
what's done with them. But this enslavement is definitely, let's just call it trafficking.
And next slide. So not only orangutans, no, orangutans are down to 55 to 65,000 individuals left. And there's been estimates that they are on the route to extinction within the next 10 to 50 years, depending on what you read. But orangutans are a big risk for extinction. We're losing 1 to 5,000 per year for the palm oil industry alone. So these are some other species that can be in other countries as well. We have Brazil, which is growing palm oil, and so is Africa. It's going into Africa too. The global demand is just keeping this palm oil growing and exploding, and it's going to take away all these forests to make cupcakes. Is it really worth it? So once those forests are gone, there's no way back. So let's think about that when we do our shopping and purchasing items, try to look for palm free.
And now we go into one of the things that most people don't understand when we talk about, but we call it recreation. And we love to celebrate, whether it's somebody's birthday or anniversary or a holiday like the 4th of July, but there's consequences, especially with fireworks. Not only do fireworks produce a massive amount of pollution, but they're also responsible for setting fires, especially when people are using them in their own communities. They create fires, but they also scare the living lights out of animals, especially wild animals who think they're gunshots and they run in terror, but also dogs and cats and bunnies. Many of you who have companion animals know that you have to give them a tranquilizer. You have to put like a thunder jacket on them to keep them safe, or some people have to drive them around their car. So it's very, very scary. Now, the happiest place on earth, Disney, has been using fireworks since 1950. And in the 50s, they've been blasting fireworks every day, every single day. And the question is, where does all that pollution go? And who is at Disneyland or Disney World but kids? So kids are getting exposed to all these chemicals, and there's lots of different chemicals. One, perchlorate, which is actually found also in rocket fuel, and it's it very easily gets uptake by plants and gets in the water system. And it's a disruptor of us in terms of absorbing iodine. And who makes your fireworks? That's the question you want to ask yourself, because these poor kids are being exposed to all these toxic chemicals. They're ingesting them via inhalation and on their skin. Transdermally, it gets into them, and it's causing a lot of health problems for these little kids. Here's the one that nobody likes to hear. And is this your vegan cruise? What you're seeing is a drone view here of the fecal matter and waste that's being dumped from the Love Boat, would you say? And so a cruise really isn't the Love Boat for animals, unfortunately. It may be for you, but for the sea and the ocean life inside there, the aquatic life, it's nothing but an annihilation.
So I don't know if you remember this show, but this show helped trigger over the next following years, the next 20 years, the cruise industry went up like 900%. So this, a lot of people don't think about I mentioned about the heavy oil that cruises used before. The propellers injure animals, and the collisions with animals. So boats are out there. We're putting more boat traffic, and especially cruises are not necessary boat traffic. So people can say, well, we need items, but we don't need cruises. We don't need to be having cruising cities cruising around, burning fuel, putting emissions in the planet, dumping toxins in the ocean, and colliding with whales and animals.
And these cruise industry, just so you know, they're being fined 20 million, 40 million. They're getting caught for
$100 million of fines.
Yeah, they're getting caught for these things, but they're making so much money that it doesn't matter to them. It doesn't matter at all. And there's actually undercover videos of employees on cruises throwing plastic bags of trash one after another, for minutes at a time into the ocean. And as you can see here, they're getting terrible ratings. They don't get good ratings. They're moving cities. They produce a massive amount of pollution. But one of the things people don't talk enough about is the sonar disruption that happens with the aquatic life that depend on sonar to function.
So here we have a disoriented whale. These ships produce an incredible amount of noise pollution that's gone up immensely in the past few decades with the increased ocean traffic. And they get disoriented, they beach themselves, they dive deeper, they try to dive deeper to avoid the sound, and they get injured by diving too quickly to depths that they shouldn't be going at so quickly. They also get in boat collisions, and this is not just whales and dolphins and porpoises, this is sea turtles, this is manta rays. All these animals are at risk for getting hit by our ships and our traffic.
So what goes up must come down. This is one of the challenges with balloons and the strings that are attached to those balloons. These are also filled with helium, which is definitely a challenge.
A finite resource.
It's a finite resource that we don't have enough of. But the really scary thing about these is when the balloons come up and they come down and then the helium is out, they look just like insects and worms and fish, and they get in the aquatic life, and you'll see what happens.
These animals, as I mentioned, foreign bodies before, this time it's through balloons and the balloon waste, the ribbons and so forth that tangle these animals. So they're out in the environment and we're putting them there.
And if you take a look at this owl, this poor owl had its wing caught in a balloon string. And as you know, they're very sensitive. So when they break a wing, they're pretty much dead. And here on the right, you have a bird that is caught on its leg and it's trying to drag the balloon. It probably won't be able to fly either. So I've been talking about the doomsday clock for a long time. And in actuality, the doomsday clock is at 100 seconds to midnight right now. And I think Greta Thunberg said it best. We have run out of excuses and we're running out of time. And as you've seen just in the last 2 days, we've seen crazy reports about what's happening with the environment. And it's not getting better. It only keeps getting worse and worse. So we need to take action on this now. One of the things that we believe in the most at Living with Harmony is this quote here from Alice Walker, that activism is my rent for living on the planet. Every single person on this planet needs to do something for Mother Nature to take care of it. And we need to be a steward of the planet and do everything we can to preserve her and protect her. I want to talk quickly about this.
So being a conscientious consumer and being mindful of how we spend our money and what we're voting for in the world that we're voting for, that comes down to packaging. Are we voting for the packaging that we want? Or are we leaving things on the shelves that we don't want? And I just wanted to mention too, that this comes down to coconut products. Those are just going everywhere as well. Those are exploding. But we need to ask ourselves, did a monkey pick your coconuts? This is something that we're seeing more and more of. So there are lists of monkey-free companies. So it's a matter of doing your research, calling companies or checking these lists and making sure you buy products that are monkey safe. You can find that through Animal Place, and through PETA has a list as well.
Yep. So these are some alternative things that you can start doing, because we're start seeing the most common trash we see are plastic bottles. So obviously, let's not use plastic bottles. Let's not use plastic bags. Packaging material, yeah, we know that's hard when you're a vegan because a lot of these things are in plastic, but we want to do our best to buy things in bulk. So when I buy beans and grains and things like that, we try to buy them in 25 or 50-pound bags. And if we can find a bulk store, we bring a glass container, we'd fill it ourselves. This way we have zero plastic. And of course, plastic cutlery and straws are something we should not be bringing, using, and we should be having our own glass or silicone straws.
Choose to reuse, come prepared. Same thing with the bathroom. You can use tree-free toilet paper made from bamboo or from recycled paper, or a bidet. You can use reusable products instead of the typical plastic single-use items or short-term use items that end up in the landfills.
This is one of my favorite slides, and this is something you've been talking about forever.
Yeah, this is actually, instead of having the lawns, why not have a wildlife habitat where you plant pollinator friendly plants and bring the bees back, bring the insects back, which then bring the birds back and other wildlife. You're creating habitat for them rather than taking it away. You also have water friendly plants and plants that don't need a lot of maintenance and water. When you have exotic plants that you like that look pretty, but they're not designed for your area, they require more pesticides, food, and they have more water. So try to check with your local horticulture office and see what works for your area. And you can create a beautiful place for wildlife right in your yard.
And also remember, when you don't have a lawn, you don't have the lawn mower, so you don't have all that exhaust, and the leaf blowers, which causes a lot of noise pollution too. And all those things disturb wildlife, the insects underneath there. They don't encourage it, where this type of wildlife habitat does.
Also, we didn't want to talk about composting. This is the one most important thing everyone can do to fight emissions. 25% of landfill waste is food waste and lawn waste and things that can be composted. So let's set up a compost bin in your yard or through a neighbor or community garden. You can check out wasteshare.org or sharewaste.org, excuse me. And then you can find people in your area who are composting, or try to set something up through a church or a school and try to make it happen, because composting, keeping the methane out of the landfills is key, because landfills produce methane, and we can reduce that. About 20% of methane comes from landfills, not just livestock, but landfills. So let's do our part to try to reduce methane where we can control it and where we can.
And they do make some portable units if you live in an apartment that they're electric actually, and they create the compost. So this is one of our favorite things to talk about is Ecosia, which is a search engine. So we like to use it because when you use Ecosia, they plant trees for you. And so it's so rewarding every time you do a search, say on composting or best ways to compost, it adds up to a certain amount of searches you do, and then they plant a tree.
So support companies that do the right thing, that do positive things for the planet. And this doesn't cost you a cent. You just set that up.
This is probably my most motivational slide, I think, and that's because plant-based is not enough anymore. It's time to put the planet first and go planet-based. And that's why we coined the term planet-based, because it's more encompassing than just somebody who, say, for instance, is eating a plant-based diet. And do you want to talk a little bit about what one of the things that we have?
So one of the things we have on our website, you can download a free guide to planet-based living. So this is a guide that you can just download, and it has a lot of basic items that we were not able to cover today. So I suggest you check this out. And you can go to our website. We also have some pre-recorded videos. We had a plant-based living support group last winter. So we have several videos on our website which go into a lot of these topics in more detail. So if you want to check out more information, that's a great place. Or you can sign up for our newsletter. When you sign up for this plant-based guide, you'll be signed up for our newsletter. And email us with any questions or comments. We'd love to hear from the community. We'd love to hear from people. And check us out on social media. We are on Instagram and Facebook.
Instagram, we have a lot of good posts on there too. And remember, we want to mention that we're here to learn just like everyone else. So we still attend seminars, we still read, we still research, we still talk to the experts. We're all in this together. And it's a work in progress. We're all trying to improve. But we just think that now with the doomsday clock getting closer and closer, we just need to be a little bit more active and take a little bit faster steps. One of the things that we ask you to do is support the American Vegan Society. We were just in their magazine. There's an article about us in there.
Their winter newsletter.
And so they're an amazing organization who we love, and we want you to support them because they're one of the oldest organizations promoting ahimsa, compassion, and love, and things like that.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Yes, if there's any last questions, Vance, that you saw, we'd be happy to take some.
Great. Well, thank you. I want to thank you on behalf of everybody who's here. We've got a lot of people saying thank you in the chats and just saying this is very much needed. Just a couple of questions. I'm going to ask one that I didn't see asked, but on the issue of recycling, that's a system that, as you said, it's broken, but if we're going to move forward, getting products from a store, we can't always get things in bulk in burlap sacks and so forth. Is there anything that the average person can do in terms of trying to alter policy to actually make recycling live up to what we're being told when we separate our stuff out?
Well, that's it, Vance. Like in Colorado, we have the Plastic Waste Reductions Act that just came in January of this year. And that's where the government or the companies are supposed to be reducing their plastic. Whether or not that will happen, I don't know. But I do think it's up to the citizens to contact their city councils and kind of be active in trying to get acts like that. Denver, Colorado, passed an act that restaurants have to ask you if you need utensils and napkins and condiments with your carryout orders. So it starts somewhere. We have to start somewhere. Start with doing it yourself and inspiring others. So I would still say to recycle, because it first reduce, then recycle, but we don't really have an option right now, but just be mindful with your purchases and try to do the best, and then try to be an activist with the laws in your area.
Right. Okay, we had a question from Flowers Fields. What about buying new clothes? I mean, she then answered, buy used, don't buy into more and more products. Is there any?
We only had so much time, but the good news is we have a video on that in our plant-based living support group about how the textile industry is one of the biggest polluters on the planet. So we do definitely emphasize, I didn't get to mention it, Craigslist, thrift stores, Nextdoor, Marketplace. If you need something like a say you're going to a wedding and you need a cocktail gown or something dress, you can go find those and people selling them in great condition because they wore it once or twice. So you can find those places. Anyway, I named the more common ones, but they're out there. And if you go to upscale thrift stores that are called boutiques or consignment shops, you can even find wedding gowns and things like that. So if you're a patient and you look for what you need, I found a tortilla press that was an antique, and I found it, and it's made from heavy duty metal. It's not plastic, and all the ones I saw in the store were plastic. So I was thrilled to buy it used. So just be patient and look for it used. And the textile industry is definitely a big polluter with all the dyes and heavy metals and rayons and polyester and fabric. So you can watch our video and learn more about it or see more about what we say about that. We don't have any swag, nothing with Living with Harmony, no t-shirts, all that.
The one thing is Living with Harmony doesn't have any swag. The only thing we have are some patches that we made that when people give us a shirt or something or a jacket, we actually sew them onto our shirts or jackets, and that's it. But we don't want to have swag because of that reason.
Thank you.
Okay. One question from Roland SK or Rollingsk. Said, are soy products sustainable? This is when you were talking about almonds. You did kind of imply that switching from almond to soy would be, a step up, but are there also commensurate problems with soy?
Yeah, good question. They're growing a lot of soy in Brazil over former rainforest land, and that's to food for livestock. They're raising more soybeans as food for livestock. So it's over 90% of soybeans produced are for livestock. So we're not contributing really to that problem. I would say to look for US grown soybeans, as I do. I buy them in bulk. I try to make my own tempeh. I haven't mastered it yet, but it's actually not, we have Seth's class to watch. I've tried it a few times, but you can buy the soybeans US grown. Don't buy them if you don't know where they're from. They could be from South America or somewhere else. A lot of imported items are. I say buy local. Try to buy things grown in the USA or your country, and try to minimize that. Organic, try to minimize that. Of course, the stuff they grow for livestock is not going to be organic. It's going to be GMO sprayed with everything. So try to focus on organic. So I do think that soy is still a good option as far as the way how easily it grows, and you can grow it in your yard in many parts of the country. So not that you want to do that, but edamame is great. But yeah, so soy, I still think you can try to find products grown in the USA, including silk.
And I just bought
USA.
the silk soy milk you're
Yeah.
talking about. Yeah, I just bought 25 pounds of soybeans, USA grown. So
Great.
yeah, I just buy them in bulk.
So I think this may be the last question. Patricia Crozier wanted to know, what is your opinion about plans to build wind turbine farms in the Atlantic Ocean off the shores of New York and New Jersey? And if you could even like use that as a springboard to address trying to balance out, you know, things that we do as vegans to try to help the planet versus other initiatives that are supposedly helping the planet, you know, by generating alternative energy sources, but are they also, you know, doing more harm than good?
Well, that's a whole nother lecture in itself about the alternative energy and the greenwashing behind it. We all need to reduce our energy. So it's going to be less important to get energy from green sources. We have to look at like the batteries to make electric cars and all the things that all the mining that goes in behind these products. So it's not necessarily a solution. It might be a better solution as far as emissions or one thing is concerned, but you have to look at the whole picture. I would say everyone needs to try to work on trying to reduce their energy use, using say a clothes dryer instead of using the electricity to run your clothes in the dryer. There you save some coal, because the coal is burned to make the electricity most likely, or the gas. So you can find ways in your own control that you can control. You can choose to bike, you can choose to bus, you can do other things, you can choose not to fly. There's things that you can do that are not so painful that you can do to reduce your energy use. You can also try to inspire others and not support things that are energy intensive, like cruises and things like that, that are just massive wastes of our gasoline and fuel and so forth. So I can't really comment on something so detailed and so extensive. I mean, it's gonna, of course, everything comes with a cost, the sea life in the Atlantic or wherever the wind turbines are, but I would just say, just do our part and try to reduce our own use.
I think that biggest secret is to start reducing our demand. That's the most important thing that we want to stress, is just start having less things and just spend more time getting happiness with family and friends and the environment, and less time doing retail therapy.
Okay, great. Well, that's we're right at 1 hour. I don't know if you have one like a last wrap up thought, or you feel like you nailed it on that one. But I don't want to cut you off if you have farewell message.
Well, I do have I just wanted to thank everyone else for the interest in learning what plant-based living is and doing more. Now, the article that we had in American Vegan Society is a good intro. It talks about gardening and growing your own food. It's another great way to reduce all this shipping and importing foods and eating foods in season, so you're not getting them flown in from other countries any time of the year. That's another big key of how we're choosing our foods and what foods that we're relying on for most of our diet. So I just want to let people know to check out that article in the winter newsletter of AVS, and to thank you for joining. And it all starts with knowledge is power, and we have to start somewhere. So thank you for being with us today, and we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, we're big on communicating with people, so feel free to get in contact with us. Look at our website. As a matter of fact, on our website, we just put a new video. Somebody made a short 12-minute documentary about us for a school project. So it kind of explains a little bit more about what we do. And remember, just do what you can. If you have money and you can donate to a cause, please do that. If you don't have money and you can donate time, please do that. Or let's just say you want to take like what we've done here today, share it with 10 different friends, because that's a way to get this message out. But make sure that you're doing something every day before you go to bed. What did you do for the planet? So make sure you did at least one thing every day, and eventually you'll be doing dozens of things every day.
Great. And that website again is livingwithharmony.org.
Yeah.
There's a link right in the chat if you get right in there now and want to click on that to follow up. And again, we thank everybody for coming out, and John and Andrea, thank you for being so passionate and articulate and educating us on all that. And that's going to do it for today.
Hey, thank you, Vance.
Okay.
Thank you, Vance, and the
Great.
American Vegan
Everybody.
Society. Bye.
Thank you. All right. See you all later.